everybody. Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for you guys coming up today. As always, try and download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, all those cool spots. Fun guest today, Trevor Sikkemma, our buddy from Pro Football Focus, going to be joining us live from Mobile as he is down there at the Senior Bowl. We got the final day of practice this week, so we'll get you the early inside track on who are the standouts you need to look for, who are the risers from this week, who your team could potentially be picking up. Since, Dad, as we know this year now, they have not only just the seniors at the Senior Bowl, right, but also underclassmen that are able to come this year. And I've seen it talked about as one of the more robust Senior Bowl classes they've had down there. And so should be a lot of good stuff for people to try and get an early start on draft season, since we know we got two teams left playing for it all, and everybody else is already trying to peddle on that hope drug that we get in the spring.
Oh, that's exactly right. Everybody's looking at, I mean, I love watching the practices of the Senior Bowl. That's the best part of it. But you're absolutely right. There's only two teams still interested in on-the-field stuff right now, and that's KC and San Fran. Obviously, everybody else is working in the offseason because every year the Patriots were in the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl. Everybody was happy except for Bill Belichick. All he was saying is, we're behind everybody else. We got to catch up. We got things to do, because everybody else is able to do things like they are now, because now, by God, this is measuring hand season. We got to know how big everybody's hands are. That's the biggest part of this whole joke of a thing that goes on right now, or somewhat of a joke at times. I'm interested in talking about the Senior Bowl because the quarterbacks are not playing well at the Senior Bowl right now. This big class we've been talking about now. The top picks aren't there, the guys that we think are going up top, but some are struggling. Names are struggling a bit there that we thought would probably fall into the first round as well.
Yeah, this is a good reminder. This is a class that has 2 elite quarterbacks, and then everyone else is probably going to be drafted higher because the NFL loves quarterbacks, and that's okay. We don't all have to be consistent. Hell, I used to go on and complain about the fact that one-on-ones are an unfair drill that skews in favor of defensive linemen, and now it is my absolute favorite thing to watch during Senior Bowl week, is these other people have to go through it and not me. It is by far one of the most inconsistent things about me, Dad, because I can't get enough of them now. I hope they do one-on-ones every day.
So it was interesting. Me and your mother were having lunch with Sydney and Ben, and again, my daughter Sydney and Ben, her husband. For those, I'll continue to explain. Ben Broniker is in med school now, but he played for the Chicago Bears. He was a tight end for the Bears, so an NFL player as well. And the reason I qualify that is to say we were out at lunch, and they had the practice on, and we were watching it. And we were both kind of shaking our heads at the one-on-one run blocking. There's one thing for a one-on-one pass blocking, because there are times in a game, college or NFL, when it is definitely a passing down, right? And you know it's a passing down. So you do the one-on-one. It's still, I don't know how much you get out of it, but the run blocking, Mike, one-on-one run blocking is a ridiculous drill to me. It makes zero sense. The technique you're using there on both sides is rarely the technique you're going to be using in the game, and rarely set up for like how it's going to be in a game. And Ben and I were talking about because I went through it as well. You went through it. I remember watching it at the U.S. Army All-American game, you doing one-on-one run blocking. And I kept thinking, I hate to get us off on a tangent here, but what are better drills? What are better drills to run than just flat out lining up and doing one-on-one run blocking? And even the one-on-one pass blocking, it's all kind of a waste to me and doesn't really tell me a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million better drills that you do in practice. Like, you don't just sit and do this, and you don't just sit and do one-on-one drive block drills against the defense in actual football practice, but this is an actual football practice. For better for worse, this is a dick measuring contest this whole week. So they're doing stuff like that you wouldn't normally do, everyone trying to peacock in front of the congregation, because eventually you get reps. Like I saw Bo Limmer, offensive lineman, I believe, from Arkansas, who absolutely rocked it during the one-on-one drive block drill. And it's not realistic, but man, it pops, and now everybody oohs and ahs. So that's why this week is way more of a beauty pageant and a spectacle than it is an actual football practice. So this isn't designed to get better. It's not designed to show anything. It's designed to give people a chance to go ooh and ah and then write stuff down in their notepad and then go back and try and see if it's on the film, like we always heard Mike Mayock said.
Yeah, I just think, why not make a half line center guard tackle, D tackle, D end, and not say if it's a run or a pass, like an actual game. You don't know if it's a run or don't know if it's a pass, and run a play and actually see what the results are there. If it's a pass, you can act like you're the center sliding left and you can get true one-on-ones, but they don't know it's a pass right out of the gate. I don't know. It seems to be a more realistic drill to me.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I've done that drill in practice. Like, that is absolutely a drill you'll do in practice. But again, here, they're not trying to figure out how well you can work with a bunch of guys you never played with before. They just want to see you go out there and block, and they've whittled it down to, in their mind, the simplest format. What you're describing is better. And again, that's what real football teams do when they're getting ready for it, is those kinds of drills where you are working with everybody else. But this isn't real football, baby. This is the Senior Bowl, and we're out here to get these clips running and make sure these guys have an opportunity to show their wares one-on-one and see if they can eventually play for a coach as good as Mike MacDonald. And Dad, we got the news yesterday that if you're going to do that, you're going to do it in Seattle. We had this weird rash of coaches that were assistants that were interviewing for head jobs that had announced they were going back to their original team. Mike MacDonald said, bleep all that. I'm going to take this head coaching money. He got announced as the next head coach, the successor of Pete Carroll, which I appreciated, Dad. You had the retirement of the 72-year-old Pete Carroll, the oldest coach in the NFL, and you replaced him with a man literally half his age in Mike MacDonald, who now becomes the youngest coach in the NFL, leapfrogging over Gerard Mayo, who had held that title for about a month now. So, Dad, This seems like a home run hire if you're Seattle for a lot of reasons that we can talk about from the football resume standpoint, from what we saw this year. But I've seen a bunch of the quotes from Baltimore Ravens, and I know you're the same way. I always care a lot more when it comes to these assistant coaches about what their players say about them. What are the people in that locker room? And there's Patrick Queen or Kyle Hamilton or any number of guys. Everyone seems to look at this and go, yeah, this is a special person in terms of what he brings to the table as a coach.
There are guys that you just see and say, okay, I could see them being elevated. And I'll continue to say this. We have more than a few first-time head coaches. We have zero clue, zero of how they're going to do. They may, exude that ability to say, okay, we think he could be a good coach. Not just by the way he coaches his defense and having one of the best defenses in the NFL, but how he structures things, what the work ethic is, because it's going to be way more than that. And now you're not just walking into the defensive room, you're the CEO. And I always like to ask guys like this, you're now the CEO, what's the first thing you do when you're sitting in the big chair? And all of a sudden questions are coming at you that you never had to answer before. Never, because you were just a coordinator. So we don't know how anybody's going to react to it. But, man, I'm with you to hear how players talk about a coach when they move on. Boy, the respect Mike MacDonald gets at 36 years old and what he's already accomplished. And we've seen coaches in their 30s before, but now, as you mentioned, he's the youngest. So now, we're in the 7 teams have a coach. The only team left is Washington. Mike, 4 of those new head coaches, defensive coaches. In an era of offense in the NFL, 4 are on the defensive side. And so just to let everybody know, it's Antonio Pierce, Gerard Mayo, Raheem Morris, and now Mike MacDonald. So I thought that was interesting as well, with one more job to go, because now you look at the most important hire is going to be who they're going to get on the offensive side of the ball. We know what those defenses did in Seattle, especially when Dan Quinn was running him, by the way, a guy still without a job, as well as Mike Vrabel, and how they were. And can Mike MacDonald bring that part of it back to Seattle?
Yeah, I think I saw people remarking the other day that Seattle having a penchant for defensive head coaches is actually pretty endearing. And I think overall, Dad, it's nice to see the market get over that idea of, oh, well, if we hire a defensive coach, how are they possibly going to be able to account for when you lose an offensive coordinator? And we've seen the ball go through the basket, I think, enough times recently in NFL head coaches where you've said, all right, whether it's that as the background, whether you have a background like Dan Campbell where, you're a tight ends coach and you never called plays or anything like that, we've got these guys that major in leadership. We've got these guys that can stand in front of the room of 53 plus 14 or whatever it is now and go out there and put together the right staff and lead in the right way. And especially in Seattle, if you've still got Pete in the building as sort of this bridge program and whatever advisory role he's going to be in to try and offset that, I think you have to feel pretty good about this. Now, for them, they'd be replacing Shane Waldron since he went over and left to go to the Chicago Bears, which they thought was going to happen the other day. Clint Hurt, their defensive line coach, a guy they didn't think was going to be retained now with the Philadelphia Eagles, or the defensive coordinator, going to be with the Philadelphia Eagles now as their D-line coach. So he's got some decisions to make. But overall, Dad, on paper, this is everything we could have wanted. The way that he went, and especially at a place in Seattle that when they were at their best was defined by defense. And when they lost their way was when they decided, hey, we're going to hand the keys over to Russell Wilson, do something that all of us, including myself back then, thought was the right move. Turned out not to be. I'm sure they would give anything to go back to anything resembling the Legion of Boom and what that era meant and how they were able to win. And in this day and age right now in the NFL, Dad, coming off a season where the Ravens did what they did, largely led by defense, it does seem as possible as ever to try and build a Death Star unit like that and go out and use it to dominate the league, especially in that division they're going to have to play in.
Yeah, and it's all we always have to remember that side of it now. So now what does Baltimore do? Is they need to do defensive coordinator. And this almost seems, Mike, like the perfect scenario to hire from within, right? You have the players. You had the best scoring defense. You tie for, I believe, for the most turnovers as well. I mean, and you had most sacks and 60 sacks. So it doesn't seem like you want to change the style, right? You bring in a D coordinator, unless that D coordinator has the same vision as Mike MacDonald, things are going to change. So it almost feels like you want to just hire from within just to keep that machine churning on that side of the ball, which has been so successful.
Yep, it'll be interesting. Some of those names. Denard Wilson, I saw the report from Jordan Schultz. Looks like he's going to take the job as the Titans defensive coach.
Right.
But Zachary Orr, their linebackers coach, who was a player in Baltimore, his only year between being a player and a coach where he wasn't in Baltimore was in 21 when he was in Jacksonville. You've got Anthony Weaver, their defensive line coach, who is actually a defensive coordinator under Bill O'Brien in Houston, so has some experience sitting in the chair there as well. And then their pass game coordinator, Chris Hewitt, also a name mentioned as a potential internal candidate. So we'll watch and see what Baltimore does in response, but a lot of change afoot for them. We talked about some of the free agents, including a guy like Justin Madubuike. They're going to pop up, Patrick Queen this offseason. So that unit going to be tested in terms of what they can absorb and keep moving forward with. I want to get to this, though, Dad. Another bit of coaching news that we got yesterday. Jeff Hafley, and I want to bring Jesse in for this since this involves her alma mater.
Yes.
Jesse, big blow to the BC Eagles as Jeff Hafley decides that the pastures are, in fact, greener in Green Bay, taking a step back from the head coaching job to the defensive coordinator there. How we feeling, bud?
Yeah, I mean, not great. Let's be honest, all right? It's not great for the Heights. Not great. Not feeling good up in Chestnut Hill, right? I mean, they went 22-26 in 4 seasons under him. You know, they were in bowl eligibility 3 of those 4 years. So they ended 7-6 this season with that win in the Fenway Bowl over SMU, who was 22 at the time, I think, ranked number 22. So, yeah, it doesn't feel great. But BC football has been absolutely mid or bad for many years. So it's also like, okay, here we go again, like the meme.
Yeah, Dad, this is certainly from the Boston College side of things has to feel like a bit of Groundhog's Day in the worst ways. When you thought you were full of promise, full of hope when you first got Hafley over here coming from his year at Ohio State. But a lot of people I saw yesterday wanted to take this and make this the sky is falling continually around college football because we've had so many changes, because we've had NIL and the portal and all these things that have made it logistically more difficult for head coaches, that there would be a mass exodus like this from college coaches to the NFL if that continued. And I do feel like it's worth reminding people there's not that many jobs in the NFL, and they're pretty hard to get. Like Jeff Hafley was a guy that was an assistant in the NFL for 7 years. He had this as a part of his background. Most of the guys that we see that jump from college to the NFL are doing so because at some point in their rise, they started in the NFL and enough people know and respect them there. So while I do agree, Dad, that the quality of life you get, while quality of life and coaching aren't things that often go hand in hand, not having to recruit has always been something that's more appealing about the NFL than its college counterpart. So in my mind, this isn't something new that's just solely tied to NIL and the portal, even if it's slightly exacerbated by them.
So let's separate them for a little bit, even though I do think there's a little bit of a connection, is college coaches going to the NFL. Listen, I've said this all along, and everybody's different. You have some coaches who coach in college who don't want to coach in the NFL, who just want to stay in college and coach. And you have some that want to use that eventually want to coach at the highest level, and that's the NFL. So they're going to look for their opportunity to leave a head coaching position and go and be a coordinator and try and go up the ranks there. You're right. That is nothing new, period, end of paragraph, start a new paragraph. It is more difficult to be a coach in college now. We're not going to sit there and feel bad for them and say, oh, poor coaches, because they're getting compensated very well. But we have to say, Mike, college sports is screwed up right now. I mean, we kept wanting the players to have a say in where they go and to get some money. Now they're getting both, and they're getting it on a quick, not as much as, let's just stay in football, as NFL players. Well, in some cases they are. Of the lowest paid NFL players, there are guys in college making more than that. But they actually have more freedom. They went from nothing to making a lot of money to freedom every year. And that's something you don't get in the NFL. You don't get free agency every year. You have a contract and you work it out and you get to free agency after X amount of years. In college sports, it is basically every year. You can be recruited, go to a school, and then get re-recruited and go to a different school. I love it. Has it affected people watching college sports, especially football? No, I'll definitely stand by that. But there's no doubt, Mike, it's screwed up and it needs some guardrails because it really is kind of out there. And while it is difficult on coaches, it's difficult all the way around just to keep your head's got to constantly be on a swivel to, I got this person, but is he going to leave or is she going to leave? And then who am I going to get to replace them? It's every year. They have more freedom than NFL players or NBA players.
They do, and it's because the NCAA was lazy and lacked foresight, and now they've done this to themselves. I always have a visceral reaction to guardrails because that's their word and the one they've been lobbing at Congress. But the structure you're talking about is making it more professionalized. It's making it resemble the pro leagues where you've got a salary cap or you've got actual free agency, you've got contracts, they're employees. And so that's the constant battle we're fighting where you don't get one without the other in my mind. You don't get to curb what they can do freedom-wise until you're willing to admit that they're employees like the guys that are at the level above them. But the bottom line for all of this is it is a lot to manage for that person in the head chair. There is always going to be someone willing to do it for the amount of money we see given these guys to do it. That's the reality that I always want to point to. And not as many of these guys as you think are going to have the option to pull the ripcord and jump to the next level. And by the way, there's always a financial component to this. I saw on USA Today, they reported that Jeff Hafley had 2 years remaining on his deal worth roughly $400,000 a year. So he's probably going to get a pay bump to go be the defensive coordinator in Green Bay and do markedly less work than he was for the last couple of years at Boston College. Now, again, that's one report, could be wrong, but I'd imagine in general, the financial jump, even if he was taking a slight dive, would be worth it to take all of that off your plate to go do the thing he does best. Because that was the one thing I was on yesterday in VSiN when this broke. Jeff Hafley is a very good defensive coordinator. Like that lone year at Ohio State. And even when he was at Boston College with lesser talent, chaos around the lines of scrimmage. A lot of single high stuff, very aggressive man coverage. Like he is going to make Green Bay a place that is ferocious up front with all the first round talent that we know they've got stocked in that front seven.
So one of the things I was thinking about, Mike, and I'm curious what you think, I started thinking about, okay, since the NCAA has mucked this thing up, how are we going to get out of it? It is going the way of the pro style. I get it, but what's going to be affected first? And I think one of the things affected first is the donors for the collectives are going to be done, saying, you know what? I just gave you $1 million for this player. This player is gone, and now you want $1.5 million to get this other player in. What you know, I'm while I have a lot of money, I'm not going to be an ATM, you know, and just keep giving money to see it be wasted. I think that's one of the first things that may happen here.
Yeah, we will certainly wait and see if the rampant spending can keep up. But at the end of the day, we've got one coach in college football that decided to make his way to the NFL. Now, the third sitting head coach this offseason to leave their position for a coordinator job elsewhere as we turn the calendar to 2024. So those of you who are listeners to Golic and Smetty, great podcast with my dad and Jessica Smetana from the Lebitard Show, probably used to some Formula One talk over there, the Formula One Minute over the Dan Lebitard Show. Dad, they're going to need to bump that to 2 if they bring that back for this week, because we woke up to an absolute bombshell bit of news in Formula One. Sources told ESPN that Lewis Hamilton is close to completing a sensational switch from Mercedes to Ferrari in 2025. Both declined to comment, but Dad, Lewis Hamilton, who is, for our American audience who might not be as familiar and maybe didn't get the Drive to Survive craze from the pandemic, Lewis Hamilton, who is the Tom Brady of Formula One racing, who is tied for the most titles all time with Ferrari's Michael Schumacher, is one of the biggest names in the sport and is synonymous with Mercedes, and now is getting ready to switch to the other side. This was something that I always look towards Jess and then Spencer Hall, who does a great job over at the Shutdown Fullcast, but also with ESPN as a Formula One consultant. And I looked at both of them, and they were both stunned. So apparently this really did come out of nowhere.
Well, I think you used the perfect name in Tom Brady. Tom Brady for years with New England, winning all the titles there, and all of a sudden he's in a different uniform. And we become less and less shocked by that. And we've seen other drivers obviously move around in Formula One, but Hamilton is so associated with Mercedes. You mentioned 7-time champ, tied with Schumacher, still has the most F1 wins in history, though Max Verstappen is certainly trying to change that down the road for sure, and what he is doing, just dominating the sport right now. But I remember the start of the season, Mercedes, their cars just weren't competing at all, and they were tinkering with them all year, to the point where I was even surprised, Mike, when we were just talking about this, that they ended up second in the Constructors' Cup. I thought Ferrari was second, and now they were close. Second and third, I think, was a difference of 3 points. Red Bull is so far out in front of this, and that's what everybody's trying to do, is to catch Red Bull. So I was, and remember, he signed, I think last year, a 2-year extension, and I think it was for like $70 million a year. The money these guys make is freakish. It's amazing, but it seems that second year was an option year, especially if he's going to move on to Ferrari now. But big news in racing world, without question. I mean, you're just like you were so used to seeing Tom Brady run out in a New England Patriots uniform, and then that first time in a Tampa Bay uniform, that first time to see Lewis Hamilton in that Ferrari outfit in the car is going to be like, wow, okay, this is wild. Because when you see that Mercedes car on the track, you're just going to assume one of them is Lewis Hamilton, and now it won't be.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of getting used to there. He would be replacing Sergio Perez there and be joining Charles Leclerc on that Ferrari team. And so there'd be a lot of dominoes to fall with the other teams. You are right, though, Dad, about the money these guys make. And it's always a reminder. I remember the first time I watched a Formula One race, I realized why the money is so different. Because when you're getting ready to watch the Super Bowl coming up, what are we going to see for the ads, right? It's going to be Doritos. It's going to be beer brands. It's going to be insurance companies there. Over there, it's like expensive watches, designer handbags. Like all of the advertisements are all stores that I would feel uncomfortable walking around for fear of breaking something and then having to purchase it after the fact.
Yeah, so true. So true. This is wild. Just think, you're right. Merch alone on this of him now in Ferrari, and I'm again. This is not like our area of expertise, but it's still so huge in the world of sports, and I'll be interested to continue because this just happened. Of the talk of this and where it goes and what the dominoes are. Obviously now Mercedes has to fill a spot as well. So we always say it's never one move. There's a domino effect to everything, but how this affects, or what I should say, what the reaction is going to be in the F1 world.
Yeah, this feels pretty massive, at least from the outside. It is the sport's biggest name. Max Verstappen, like you said, is the driver of the moment right now who has far outpaced the rest of the sport in a way that's becoming sort of, I always call it the UConn women's basketball problem, when people always used to wring their hands about that years ago, when UConn was in such a dominant run and is it bad for the sport and blah, 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 all this stuff that was sort of coded and weird. But for Formula One, it's been a lot of the same stuff where every time you turn on a race, you expect Max to win, but Lewis Hamilton is still the name that I think for outsiders, and because he's very outspoken, he's a guy that's very, politically minded, is always willing to throw his name behind a cause that he believes in. He's got a little bit more of that star power that exceeds even the sport itself. So going to be fascinated to watch and see if this plays out now. As again, this would be Lewis Hamilton joining Ferrari in the 2025 season for Formula One. So we'll get to more of that. Maybe eventually get your partner Smetty on here and get her reaction to all this, as I know she's super dialed in on this front. But Jesse, we had a night full of NBA homecomings last night. Earlier in the night, we had Kevin Durant making his return back to the Brooklyn Nets, which he even pushed back on. He's like, they don't need to do a video for me. I wasn't there long enough for anything real to happen. I didn't have a connection with those fans. Little different story for Damian Lillard going back home to Portland last night.
Yeah, so he played his first game back in Portland. Like you mentioned, he got a standing ovation. It was great. Didn't get the win, so kind of spoiled his little homecoming, depending on how you look at it. But here's Lillard after the game on his return.
More than anything, it was just kind of draining, you know what I mean? Just everything around it and what it was. Is, I ain't gonna say I'm happy that it's over, but I'm just like, you know, just dealing with everything that came with it. I've been asked a million times, like, what is it like being back in Portland and how do you feel and all of this stuff. But I've really enjoyed being back, but just the whole spectacle of it is just, you know, just a little bit draining, you know. Fair enough, because you know these guys get asked about it a million times, and then you're also kind of like, well, what's the crowd going to do once I get out there?
And I heard last night, it was interesting, J.J. Redick was on the call for the Brooklyn game right before this, and since that was a homecoming for Kevin Durant, him and Richard Jefferson were talking about going back to the team you spent a long time for after you played there. And Dad, we see this all from the outside. I always liken it to a senior day, right? There's a little bit of emotion tied in because you've got so many memories there. You've got all this stuff there, but they also talked about the practical differences. Like J.J. Redick said, my shooting routine pregame got all messed up because everyone that you've known from all that time there is coming back out to say hi to you. All the people that worked on the support staff, the ushers in the stadium, I'm sure security people in the back annals of the stadium there that you would see on the way in. You've got so many contact points there and so many people that loved you and were a part of the journey that you're doing all of this stuff that isn't basketball in the lead up to a game, where then you're trying to go out there and do the very human thing of beat your ex and show them that you're doing better without them.
Yeah, it's a great point because there is that part of it kind of behind the curtain type thing. And I'm sure even finding the right, you know, road to the visitors' locker room, something he never had to do, you know, is always in the home locker room there. But you're right. A lot of people that are going to say hi and he's going to say hi too. I agree. You're kind of thrown out of your routine. He didn't shoot well from the three-point line. I think it was 3 of 13. But I love the ovation that he got. And I thought it interesting. He also said, I can see myself at the end of my career back in a Trailblazer uniform again. So one of those where he would probably retire as a Portland Trailblazer. Could see that. So this was one of those because, Jesse, you're right. You never know the reception you're going to get, even though I don't think there was many people that thought this was going to be a bad reception, but you do never know because remember it was like, hey, if you're going to rebuild, trade me. I don't want to do that. And they decided to rebuild, but so he still wanted out because of that. So you never know how fans are going to react, but I love the way they reacted to him. He's always loved that city. He stayed way longer than a lot of us and especially basketball analysts and experts thought he was going to stay in Portland because he wanted to win one there so badly. So kudos to him and the fans for the way they treated him. And you're right about the Kevin Durant thing. You don't need, I mean, he's going back to a team where that was probably one of the biggest flops of all time, right? Where they put together a superstar team and it was horrific. It absolutely imploded upon itself. So, I mean, is that really a homecoming of any kind?
Probably a lot more bad memories. Like you mentioned, Dame accidentally walking to the home locker room and it basically being like a movie montage. The other side, Kevin Durant had to be looking around there and just seeing one bad like James Harden interaction after another there. So I'll be interested to see for Dame overall if there's any buyer's remorse on the other side of this, leaving and going and trying to take this shot, but going to a place where you're not the man, you're in Giannis's building now, and you've already had a coach fired in your limited time there in Milwaukee.
back to GoJo and Golic. So yesterday on the show, we had the great Tom Habistro on the show, and at the end of our segment, he called into focus the NBA's 65-game rule regarding eligibility for awards after Joel Embiid left the Sixers game against the Warriors with an injury. So after the game, Draymond Green spoke about the rule on his podcast. Take a listen to what Tom had to say, followed by Draymond's take on that 65-game rule.
They oftentimes will point to the fact that they go from maybe I have a 1% chance of having an injury to 0, and that is worth something. So Joel Embiid, if he misses a lot of time due to this injury, it'd be a real shame. And it would get me to the point where I think the national conversation would be, we need to get rid of this 65-game rule.
Guys didn't face those rules before, but those same all NBA teams, those same MVP awards lists, Defensive Player of the Year, those lists are the same. I once lost a Defensive Player of the Year award to Kawhi Leonard, and I think he played 51 games. In turn, you get Joel, who comes out there tonight, and he forces it. And Freak played with him and J.K. diving for the ball, but maybe it's not as bad if the knee isn't already banged up. I don't really bang with it. And now we got one of our premier faces in this league, the MVP of our league, possibly hurt for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I mean, he makes a pretty good point. Also, when we were just in the break before this, Senior, you mentioned that you have to play 20 minutes in those games for them to count anyway. So it's not like you can just check in and, ball out for a couple of minutes and then come out.
I think everybody understands why they made the rule. They made the rule for the fans. So, because you hear players, bring up quotes from athletes way back in the day. Why do you play all the games? Because that one game I go out there might be the first time, a dad or a mom brings their kid to a game and haven't seen it before. And, that whole, feel-good story of why you play. And we've seen players in basketball back in the day playing 82 games, no problem, just doing it like it was the norm. And now we get load management. And I've always been one that says you do what you have to do for your team to win the goal, to get to the goal of winning your championship. And if that means sitting sometimes, so be it. That's the way it goes. So I get the rule. But Mike, I forgot or didn't remember about the 20-minute rule. Like Tyrese Halliburton from the Pacers, he can I think only miss 3 more games to be eligible. And in one of the games he's played, he only played 13 minutes, so that one doesn't count. I mean, So are these players, and now remember award, and I'm not going to get into the whole Halliburton extra money that he could make because, man, you dive into the weeds on that. The bottom line is to get more money off the max of his contract. Part of it is is making an all-NBA team, which he certainly would be able to do. But he wouldn't be eligible for that if he doesn't play the 65 games at 20 minutes a game. So are players now going to play injured to get to that baseline so they will be eligible to win those awards? Not so much to say I won this award, but have something kicking in their contract that gives them a ton more money. So you wonder if this rule is backfiring a little bit, Mike.
Oh, I would say it's already backfired. Like what you brought up there, Tom Ziller covered this in his newsletter in depth, but essentially what it boils down to is an all-NBA team for Tyrese Halliburton this year could, over the life of his next 5-year contract, be worth about $40 million to him. Yeah. Like that's real money that this could be worth based on what already, like we've already had discussions for years on Sports Talk Radio about tying all NBA teams to that kind of money because it's voted on by the media, because there's such there's media members that are uncomfortable with having that big of an effect on that. And now you're going to throw in a rule like this that, yes, does incentivize guys to try and come back. And at times we've seen play through injury they otherwise wouldn't and risk their team's overall success, which for Joel Embiid and the 76ers, that's their meal ticket to everything they want in the postseason. Right. That guy potentially coming back out there and pushing it too much too soon. So, yeah, I think, Dad, I don't fault the NBA for trying. Now, The one thing I'd push back on a little bit, and maybe this is just because I'm a cynic when you say it's because they did this for the fans. The NBA did this because they need better regular season TV ratings to bring to the table the next time they want to negotiate for new, very expensive television rights. Like, I don't want to make this too altruistic on their behalf. They've got a goal for this too, but I think it was well-intentioned. They threw a lot at it. They said, we're going to try the in-season tournament. We're going to do the 65-game rule, and we're going to see what happens. And what do we see this season? In-season tournament, overwhelming success by everyone's estimation. You had guys playing their asses off early in the regular season. You had national media talking about the NBA during football season well before we usually do in December. That worked. This does not seem to be, while you've got some guys you can point to that have played more games than normal and say maybe that's good. Overall, I think when you look at this, the in-season tournament, yeah, keep on doing that. And then as you're looking at things that didn't work, I think you've got to go back and either seriously consider retooling this or scrapping it all together, because the unintended consequences, I think, have already outweighed any of the positive that you've gotten from this.
Yeah, I do think it has to be scrapped or retooled. And it is one of those things you try, right? We've seen this in other sports. You try something for a year, and then you say, okay, let's decide if we're going to keep going with this or not. So it's not like we fault anybody for this, for the reasons, and you're right. I was probably a little too altruistic in thinking it was all for the fans. You're right, it's not. I agree with that. But regardless, it's a rule right now that does need some tweaking. What that's going to be, I don't know, but it does, because it has definitely backfired on them. No doubt about it.
Yeah, so I think I'll be interested to see if overall TV ratings for some of the primetime midweek games are up because you've had more stars playing them. Like, I'm sure the NBA is painstakingly going over information to try and justify their decision on the other side, because we look at, a lot of the stars from this year, and the goal was to get stars to play in the big-time TV games. Like, yes, seeing them in person is important too, but for the NBA to continue to justify all the money that people spend on them and their media rights, you need guys to play, and you've got Anthony Davis on pace to play in 77 games, LeBron 74, Kawhi Leonard on pace to play in 75 games, which is a revelation for him. Some of that might be luck, some of that might be circumstance. We're going to wait and see how it all washes out in the end, but I have to imagine seeing this kind of response from players in critical spots going to make that pretty difficult to justify in the same way.
So right now, quickly, you have Joel Embiid can only miss 5 more games, or 3 more games. Tyrese Halliburton can only miss 5 more games. Of what he said about the rule, I think it's a stupid rule, like plenty of the guys in this league, but it's what the owners want. So as players, we got to do our job in playing 65 games if we're able to. Kyrie Irving is already ineligible. Other players on the brink, Jamal Murray, Jimmy Butler, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, are all on the brink of being ineligible for any of these awards. So it's getting pretty interesting, and it'd be so hard for me to believe that this will not be gone or tweaked somehow next year.
Completely agree. So we'll watch on that. But, Dad, we mentioned LeBron James as someone on pace to play a lot of games, and that's been something that LeBron's enjoyed for the last few seasons. He's now also adding another thing that he gets to enjoy upcoming this fall, and that's his partnership with DraftKings, baby. LeBron James made the announcement yesterday. Maybe this is what the time emoji was about. It was almost time to announce that LeBron James was coming on board as a DraftKings partner. He talked about wanting to make sure his football picks got seen out there. We've seen him talk about that a lot in recent years. So, LeBron, welcome to the team. We're very excited. I'm sure this means he's going to be our celebrity guest picker to get those football picks out to you every Friday. That's got to be in the fine print somewhere in the contract. LeBron, don't worry. We read it for you. Trust us. You don't need to go looking yourself.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Listen, he from, Akron and what he's done there, me from Cleveland, a couple of Northeast Ohio guys kind of hanging out, talking sports. So, yeah, we look forward to every Friday him making the picks on GoJo and Golic. I mean, let's just talk it into existence, right? I mean, that's what we have to do. He's a monster football fan, and, we while we can talk any sport, we certainly concentrate on the football side of it. So it just seems like a match made in DraftKings heaven.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Dad. So we'll get everyone on that, continue to speak that into the universe. We've got, got the best in the business. The LeBron Jordan debate now officially over in my mind. LeBron James was always my GOAT. LeBron, I've been on your side forever. I just want you to know that. If you're considering other people in this conversation, just remember, I've been going to bat for you for like 9 years now with a microphone professionally in my face. So remember who was always on your side, brother.
GoJo and Golic. Guys, next week, live from Las Vegas. You can find us at a new time on DraftKings Network, okay? Listen up. The fellas are going to be coming at you live from Radio Row from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, okay? The guys have some huge names lined up as guests. They're going to be taking in all the Super Bowl festivities. You can watch the best of our radio shows each day in our usual 8 to 10 a.m. time slot. And of course, find us on YouTube, across social media, wherever you download your podcast. GoJo and Golic, live from Las Vegas, starts next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I will not be in Las Vegas because I'm really pregnant and I'm not allowed to get on an airplane or leave the state. So I will not be part of that coverage, but I will be there in spirit. Fellas, let's talk about something else. The internet was popping off, okay, before the Ravens-Chiefs game when we saw Travis Kelce tossing Justin Tucker's helmet, moving his crap off the field during warm-ups. Things were getting chippy, and we finally heard Travis Kelce's side of the story on the New Heights pod.
We do our same warm-up every single time on our side of the field. Specialists, because of like the wind factor, they get a chance to kick at both field goals. But it's always, if you're trying to go onto the other team's designated area, stay out of their way.
That is the unwritten rule.
You don't interfere with what they have going on. Eyes are looking left and they got a helmet down by their feet. If you're not going to pick that up, I'll happily move that for you.
It's actually kind of dangerous.
I get it. I mean, he was kind of winking at me, like being a dick about it, like trying to get under the skin.
He knew what he was doing.
I get it, but me and Pat, we just weren't in a joking mood. So, Justin, sorry if we took it to a level that you didn't think it'd get to that way, but if you're going to be a dick, I promise you, I can one-up you every time, dude.
So, a little bit, Travis Kelce saying, yeah, it wasn't like too serious, but at the same time, it was a little bit serious.
So I'm not here to psychoanalyze this too much, Dad, but the little bit of extra edge to this, to me, boils down to the fact that even though he's largely considered the best to ever do it, even though he should be a Hall of Famer for it, he's still a kicker. And the fact that this happened and came from a kicker as the source of this strife, to me is the added bit of, oh, we're definitely not going to take this because what the hell are you going to do about it?
And by the way, they're right about the warm-ups for someone who was on the field warming up for 9 years in the league. And then now calling games on Sunday night, I'm down on the field when warm-ups going on. Nothing has really changed. What Travis said is right. The teams get half the field, half the side to warm up, but kickers do kick on both sides so they can play the wind and all that. And Justin Tucker wasn't kicking yet. He was just in the beginning of it, kind of stretching, because there's no kicker that kicks field goals from the goal line. But that's where he was. He was like on the 5-yard line, and he had his kicking tee and his helmet on the goal line. So if players are playing there on the opposing team, you got to move your stuff. And even Justin Tucker said he was, being kind of dickish, in what he was doing, and, wink, wink to Travis. But Travis was right. I mean, as the kicker, you have to move your stuff. And then they'll eventually go back and kick in there's certain areas. The punters will punt both ways as well. But the punters, if they're punting to the side of the other team, they'll see where the guys are working out on the field, and they'll punt the other way. So Travis is right. Kickers, while they get both sides, got to stay out of the way when you're dealing with the opponent's side of the field. Justin Tucker did not, and Patrick and Travis weren't having any of it, especially when they were standing right where the helmet and the shoes are. And for anybody that wants to say, well, maybe they should move, no, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. They should not move. The kicker should move and move his stuff.
I was going to say, that's where the kicker factor comes in. Even as respected and beloved as Justin Tucker is, even as cool as I think he is, the coolest kicker I've ever seen and been a part of. There was a great story in Anscape the other day about the way he embraces Baltimore overall and is such a valued member of the community. All that stuff can be true, but at the end of the day, you're not one of the guys out there having to run into people for 3.5 hours on that field in the same way these dudes are. And so your time and your station out there in that field not going to be valued and treated the same when it comes to the smoke.
That actually made me laugh really hard because I did see a tweet that was going going around from someone who was either pretending to be like new to football, like one of the Swifties or something. When this whole kicker thing was happening, they're like, why does the kicker wear a regular uniform? Like, people aren't supposed to touch them. They should be wearing a beautiful figure skating uniform that embodies the spirit of the other team. And I was like, man,
wow,
what a gift.
I mean,
stuff
a great
that
idea.
Goes on, as you all know, Mike, stuff that goes on in pregame where sometimes you're warming up and the other team comes running out. If the opposing team is doing something in that line of where they're running out, teams will run right through those players, right? Run right through their drill. And then you'll start to pushing and the shoving. It's so dumb, yet it's something we all did. And it's something we either were the instigators of or we reacted to and had no problem squaring off with somebody in pregame. Now, nothing bad is going to happen in pregame. Nobody wants to get tossed out before the game even happens. But there is that stuff happening all the time. Hell, at Notre Dame's tunnel, we used to come out of the same tunnel.
Yeah.
There used to be pushing and shoving all the time. Now Notre Dame makes the opposing team come out of a different tunnel now, so you just don't get into that anymore. But stuff happening in pregame, happens more than you would think, and it's over quicker than you would think.
Or in postgame, like we had the whole Michigan State tunnel incident with Michigan and Michigan State last year that ended with like actual assault charges because you had two teams going up the same tunnel the entire time. I remember, Dad, the Chargers game you were calling against the Cowboys. I was down on the field talking to Mike Heastan, who is the son of my former offensive line coach, Harry Heastan, and was on the Chargers staff. And we were standing there talking, and all of a sudden, something like that happened. The Cowboys ran out through one of the Chargers scrums, and everyone started scrapping. He and I were talking, and I just see out of the corner of his eye, he looks. And football law, you've got to run towards it, especially as a coach, to try and get your guys out of there. But it's just funny how normal that stuff is. Like guys going out there and doing the thing where they stomp on the opposing team's logo or any of that stuff. Like the gamesmanship starts, especially in a game like that with Baltimore and Kansas City, where we saw they ran hot the entire time. And Baltimore, they went over a line. They did a bad job managing their emotions. And the Chiefs were able to handle it and weaponize Baltimore's emotions against them. Like that sort of gamesmanship, you lived as a part of one of the most ferocious defenses ever in Philadelphia, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. There was more than a few pregame and postgame situations with that team. As I said, and Mike, obviously you know this, this happens so much, but it's usually over so quickly. There are a couple of things that I miss and that are funny to me, and they're both on the college end. I miss the fact when teams are playing, if they're the home team and you're playing on grass, you can do it. Florida State with the mascot on the horse throwing the spear into the ground, or USC, the Trojan who was on the horse with the sword sticking it into the ground. I love that kind of thing, right? And I still think the USC mascot should be put on scholarship, and it should be somebody who's roided out like crazy and just so buffed in that uniform. I was
saying it should be put on steroids. Should be put on a very rigorous Hollywood-like, Rocky-like steroid program.
Without a doubt. The things that are the funniest to me are in college when you beat a team on their home field and you run around with the flag and try and plant it in their logo on the 50-yard line when it's artificial turf, and it's not going to stick.
Was that Baker Mayfield that happened to?
Baker did that, but Baker did it, yes. But it's happened to others as well. You go and you stick, and you know it's not going, and then you let it go, and it just falls over. And it kind of like wah wah.
Yeah, that's the post-game celebration version of like the Deshaun Jackson, you make an incredible play for a touchdown and then drop the ball before the goal line type deal. Like, you were so close, you had it there, and then it all slipped away. So cooler heads prevailed there. Shout out to Pat Mahomes, too, who had to deal with a day full of internet slander because a bad side profile pic showed up of him and his dad bod, which, he's a quarterback. I don't know what you guys expect here. Not all these guys look like Brady Quinn. And that's not even that bad. Like, he has a little bit of a punch from the side. Who among us?
It's Will Levis now, right? He's the poster boy for the built quarterbacks now. They say almost too muscular. All I got to say about Mahomes is, one, as you did, one of us, right? I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
Hey, man, listen, he is the greatest quarterback of this generation and going to push for the greatest of all time. Shout out to him for making himself slightly more approachable to the rest of us. That's very kind.
back to GoJo and Golic. Fellas, it's hand measuring season once again. Thank God we're here. Senior Bowl underway in Mobile, Alabama, and we're being treated to some nice hand picks, free of charge, okay? Michael Penix Jr. was showing off these bad boys right here. Man, that's a good looking hand. Look at that hand. Getting a look at that for free.
At least they're not toes.
Yeah, well, you'd have to pay extra for those. Okay, so guys are standing by right now with our special guest who is covering all of the good hand measuring, hand showing off stuff that we are being treated to right now.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, this is a very wonderful time of year, and we're delighted right now. Our good buddy Trevor Sikkemma, kind enough to join us, the lead draft analyst over at Pro Football Focus, has been down in Mobile. And Trev, is this like the first day of training camp? Like for the rest of us, it always felt like football season when you're putting on the pads for the first time or getting the helmet. Is showing up down in Mobile now when it officially feels like draft season to you?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. This is... it was funny. We do a lot of film reviews of people. We're watching a ton of tape beforehand. We're doing the draft guy. We're updating the big board. We've got the mock draft simulator at PFF. But then for Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl, it's like you get on location and then just that first crack of the pads that you actually hear in person, you're like, oh, this is it. Like, this is actually it. This is what it's all about. So, yeah, really good group down here in Mobile and Senior Bowl. One of the most talented rosters on paper, even before the week began, that I can remember in a long, long time, and it has definitely lived up to the billing.
And we do have the rule change where juniors now can play in the game. That used to not be the case. So we have some down there, including some we'll talk about. I think Michael Hall Jr., the kid from Ohio State, has been performing well. He was an underclassman. But let's start at the position where everybody wants to start, and that's the quarterback position. It seems the quarterback play has been inconsistent. So talk about the ones, especially the ones we know, the Michael Penix Jr.'s, the Bo Nixes of the world, and how that's all going.
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, I think when you look at these guys, it's great to get a look at them throwing one after the other. That's a really valuable part of being here at the Senior Bowl because it's kind of it can get lost in the shuffle when you watch a guy's tape over and over and over and over again. You get very used to how they throw and what their arm power is like, and you can kind of convince yourself one way or the other, like, okay, we think he does have a really good arm. Okay, maybe it's not so great, but it's when you stack him up against his peers that you really get a good look at what that might be. And I say that to start to point out Michael Penix has the best arm here, I feel. I mean, when it comes to velocity and pushing the ball down the field, no, it hasn't been pinpoint accurate, but there have been a couple of times where he's feeding it right in between zone coverage, or he's looking to take a deep shot and just that ball just rockets off of his hand. He's got longer arms. He's got a little bit longer of a release and unorthodox throwing motion. But when that ball gets to the point where he's releasing it out of his wrist, it is a rocket. And I think you can totally see that here in Mobile. When it comes to Nix, I don't think he's wowed, but I don't think he's really disappointed either. I've talked to some people who have been saying, like, man, I was looking to see more, but other people were saying, man, he's been really consistent. So I'm kind of in the middle, but I lean more towards that consistency part of it. There's only so much that you can do in practice. You know, they're running a lot of install stuff. They're trying to get the offense figured out. And so a lot of it is those shorter passes. And I feel like I've seen in a couple of different instances the different arm angles, where he's looking with the ball, how quick he has been. He's taken those reps with the first team. So I do think accuracy-wise, it feels like Bo Nix is kind of a step above. And then when you look at some of the other quarterbacks, just in the other group, because Penix and Nix are on the same team, so it's been great to see them one after the other. Joe Milton's got a cannon of an arm, but it's the same story, just not as accurate as it is needed to be. So that has not impressed as much as you have wanted to see. I think Spencer Rattler is playing well, but again, he is somebody who hasn't been pinpoint accurate for him. Not that the week has been bad for Spencer Rattler. I think he has had some good throws, and Jim Nagy going into the week was saying, hey, Spencer Rattler is going to get drafted a lot higher than people in draft media seem to think he is. And we've kind of had him right around that third, fourth round range on our big board for a long time now. I still think that that's probably where the range is for him. But these people who think, oh, Spencer Rattler, he's an afterthought. He's not going to get drafted. Think about the Oklahoma days, how he left there. That's not the case with him anymore. He's a different guy since he's been at South Carolina, and I think he's proving that probably in the interview process as well. So that's kind of where we have the quarterbacks pegged in the Senior Bowl.
So the quarterbacks are going to be an interesting discussion. The two best quarterbacks in the class that we know in Drake May and Caleb Williams, obviously not down there and going to be a part of this going forward. But Trevor, outside of the quarterbacks, what's been in your mind the deepest position that we've seen going to work down in Mobile so far?
There's a lot of really good wide receivers in this class in general, and we thought that they were going to be able to stand out in Mobile, and I really think they are. I mean, you look at guys like Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall, who it feels like they've been uncoverable. It's a class that there's so many of these smaller receivers. You can throw Anais Smith in there as well, going back to the Shrine Bowl, Taj Washington, Malik Washington, and you watch all these guys on tape and you go, man, there can't be this many like potential impact smaller wide receivers in this class, but there are. There genuinely are, and I think I've got so many second, third round grades on so many of these players because they're separation artists. And here we have, I think, two very, very good ones in Ricky Pearsall from Florida and Roman Wilson from Michigan, and they're kind of winning in a little bit of different ways. Pearsall is more of that intermediate and underneath type of route runner separator, but he's tough as nails at the catch point. I think you see that as well, where Roman Wilson is that vertical speed, that 4.3 track speed from his background. What we saw at Michigan, especially over the last year, using him as a deep threat, he was winning consistently on day one with a lot of those vertical routes. And it's tough to do when DBs know they don't want to get beat. They don't want to get put on a highlight reel. And even though they're still kind of learning the installs and the chemistry of the coverage of the guys that they're working with here, those two players to me really stood out in a group that is super deep. I mean, it just feels like you can name all sorts of different wide receivers, Tez Walker, Ladd McConkey, like they're Xavier Legette. There's so many guys in this group that have had the opportunity to make plays, and some have made more than others, but those two, to me, Pearsall and Wilson, are the ones that are standing out from a really, really deep position.
So the practice week here seems so much more important than the game where the scouts are watching the practice. So when people are watching the practice, Trev, what drills in your mind, do you think in the scouts' mind, do they hang their hat more on than other drills?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it comes down to those one-on-ones, right? And certainly how quickly you pick up a lot of the install work, I think, is a valuable part of this Senior Bowl. What were you like on day one? Were you able to pick it up quickly? And if you are able to pick it up quickly, okay, that's a good sign. That means a lot. That means you take to coaching very, very quickly, or maybe you're just that naturally talented. But as the week goes on, sometimes a lot of progression in that area is also seen as a positive. So for the guys that are a little bit more of a slow burn, as long as you end the week good, I think that that can mean a lot into what these coaches think of you when it comes to the teaching. Okay, because we talk about that all the time, right? We could look at guys who are physically gifted and we say, oh, when he gets to the NFL, he'll just learn, more hand moves and where to place his hands in run blocking or pass rushing, or how to get off press or how to press, whatever it is. And it's not always that simple, right? Some guys pick it up better than others. And so being able to see that progression, I think, is really, really important. But then going back to my original answer, those one-on-ones are so, so important, because even though it's skewed a little bit more towards pass rushers on the O-line, D-line side and wide receivers on the wide receiver DB side, it's competitive, man. And that's what football is all about. It's about going up against somebody that's right in front of you and being better than them. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect. Doesn't mean that you're always going to have those clean wins, but they want to see these guys compete. And of course, the ones that are the best are going to be able to dominate pretty early and consistently throughout the week. So to me, I always love those one-on-one periods, not only because it gets social media buzzing and it's a lot of fun to get those clips out there and have that engagement with people who care about the draft, but to me, being able to see what a guy is like just going head up against somebody tells you a lot about their mental makeup as an athlete and what they can be as a pro.
You mentioned the O-line, D-line, one-on-one specifically. Obviously, this so skews in favor heavily of the Hosses. And I think in general, for a lot of people right now around NFL circles, fans of NFL teams, there's been a lot of conversation about the lack of offensive line depth around the league, the lack of quality development at this position overall. And I know especially with tackle, this is viewed as a pretty deep class and one with a lot of real high-end talent here. So from what you've seen in the trenches so far on the offensive side this week, who are some names that fans that are hoping their NFL team can cure that problem that they're having up front should keep an eye on coming out of this week?
Yeah, I can't believe we made it this far into the segment before you specifically asked about the trench players. I really am. I thought that was going to be the fastball down the pipe right off the bat. But no, honestly, that's been the funnest part of this week, is watching these O-linemen and D-linemen, the tackles. Man, Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma has all the tools in the world. It is such a athletically gifted offensive tackle class. You got so many guys who are great movers. Olu Fashanu from Penn State, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, and just the list goes on and on as you get throughout the offensive tackle rankings. But I'm telling you, Tyler Guyton, to me, not even close, the most athletic one in a very athletic class. He's a former tight end, former defensive end. He just moves so well. What I loved seeing from him this week is, okay, it's kind of the same strengths and weaknesses that we saw from his film at Oklahoma. He's a one-year starter. The hand placement isn't really there. Sometimes it's way too wide. Sometimes he's more of a shover than he really is a blocker, getting hands on guys and not letting them go. But hyper competitive dude. He knew that Chris Braswell from Alabama, the edge rusher, was probably the highest ranked player that he was going to go up against in practice. And you could visibly see him like, I want this dude. Like, I want to go up against this dude. He ended up giving him a high five before their first rep and afterwards. And he's somebody who likes to go to work, gets pumped up about how good that he can be. And I think that progression from him. So he's somebody that everybody's got to look out for. Talize Fuaga from Oregon State. I mean, that's my dude. I've loved this dude since I first got eyes on him really in September and October. He plays with so much power, but his feet are really light. Is he as flexible in his kick slides as maybe like Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt? No, not quite, but he understands his landmarks. He understands how to get to him, cut off some of those speed rushers, and when he gets hands on you, man, it's over. So those, I think, are the two top first-round caliber offensive tackles that we have in this class. But another guy I really want to shout out is Christian Jones from Texas. Longtime starter, fifth-year player, 48 starts under his belt at Texas, and you go, okay, hey, experience is great. Why didn't you go to the league sooner? Like, what's up with that? Because if you were a starter for that long, why didn't the league come calling a little bit sooner for you? And so there's a little bit of lack of natural athleticism and inflexibility with him, but so smart. The feet are married with the hands, the shoulder movements, everything. He is just so in sync body-wise to where when guys try to come into his chest, not only does he handle that contact well, he knows where his hands need to shoot. And there have been a couple of times where, man, it's just been vice grips. Like, guys have not been able to get off, and he's had some of the most impressive one-on-one reps there. So from the offensive tackle specifically, those guys I feel like are the ones who are standing out a lot to me.
So let's go to the athletes in the defensive line and that side of the ball. You look and I know we talk about edge rushers all the time, but interior D-line, I mentioned his name before, Michael Hall, the kid from Ohio State, an underclassman, showed well on the one-on-one pass rush, got the guard in space at times, which doesn't happen all the times, but looked good in those. But he's 6'3", 280. Are we going to see more of that, more of the Aaron Donald type size guys playing on the interior because of their quickness?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, not that it's going to be an immediate change, but you guys have seen the change in just football overall. You know, whether it's you've been coming from, I think we first saw this, in the Pac-12 and the Big 12, just lighter offensive and defensive linemen overall, more spacing, more speed. And I think that has kind of crept into, now we see a lot of that in the ACC and the SEC and even in the Big 10, which has been known more as like this big power, almost last throwback type of brand of football. But you even see a guy like Michael Hall from Ohio State. This is a player who is, like you mentioned, lighter than normal interior defensive lineman at the next level, but can really give you a lot of value as that pass rush specialist type of player. And there were a handful of reps on day 2, Wednesday, that were really impressive from him. Whether it was a spin move or an arm over or a club rip, or he's just, his quickness against these guys was really impressive. And he was another person who was highly competitive. The motor was running hot. He had a couple of pass breakups as well in the scrimmage period. So you love to see that. And to your point, I think that here at the Senior Bowl, there's another guy, Braden Fisk from Florida State, who is another sub-300 interior defensive lineman. Now, he's more 295, so that's a little bit closer to what you want, but he's kind of that same way. He wins with ultra quickness and just an ability to get across the face and shoot into a gap. And we saw that in one-on-one. He saw some of the most impressive one-on-one reps of anybody at this practice. And so that's kind of what you want to see from those lighter guys. You've got to be able to win very, very quickly. And I think they do. And I believe that you look at examples. I know this is the easy one to look to, but Elijah Cansey from the Buccaneers, right? He comes out last year and just such an outlier in size. And you go, what do you do with this guy? I love his film. He's a better run defender than you think he's going to be at that weight. But you go, man, NFL, you know what they say, big people beat up little people, right? And so when you're a little bit smaller, you have these question marks for you. But He had a fantastic year in Tampa Bay as a rookie, really strong finish to the season. And I think he, just as much as, Aaron Donald is the example that everybody goes to, but I think Kancey himself is another more new age example of, this can work at the NFL level. And I think you're going to see teams be more open to taking guys who a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit more specialists, but ones that can create a lot of value.
Yep, got to see the ball go through the basket for a lot of NFL personnel before you're willing to take some more risks on guys that have been more outliers when it comes to that physical profile. And that's something that a lot of times, too, can apply to small school guys who, for this week especially, the guys that don't come from bona fide Power 5 schools who are going against this competition week in and week out, it's always a huge opportunity for them. Have there been a couple of small school guys, Trev, that have stuck out to you from this week that have a chance to kind of be those either, not even draft diamonds because they're guys in Mobile, they're good players, but names that most NFL fans wouldn't have known coming right from the college game?
Man, this isn't a small name because he played at Louisville and he played at Florida State beforehand, but I don't think enough people are talking about Jarvis Brownlee Jr., who is the cornerback from Louisville, who, like I said, he was a transfer from Florida State. Shoot, I covered the draft and I didn't know a ton about him going into this event. He had one of the most dominant coverage days that I've seen in a while at a Senior Bowl yesterday. And I think that he is somebody who was really, really flashing. He had 3 reps in a row against one-on-one wide receiver situations where not only did he win the rep, not only did he play coverage really well, his coverage was so tight, he could have intercepted the ball all 3 times. He didn't come up with an interception, but it was coming off of his hand. He was right there for it. So he's somebody who, not a small school guy, but somebody that I definitely want to shout out. I don't know if people consider Quinyon Mitchell a small school guy anymore because he's been talked about as a first-round player, but holy cow, guys. Anytime you talk about a player from Toledo going as high as Quinyon Mitchell could, which beginning of the week started off, all right, maybe fringe first round guy, early second round or late first round, had a fantastic first day, had a lockdown day again with a couple of interceptions, at least one that I saw on yesterday's practice. And now we're talking about a cornerback from Toledo maybe being the first corner taken in the draft over some studs that we've had from Clemson and Alabama and Missouri and these guys that are competing for that title this year. So those are 2 guys, I think, from defensive back that pop into my head very quickly as names that I really wanted to shout out that not a lot of people maybe know.
Just maybe about a minute left. I'll put you on the spot here. How many quarterbacks go in the first round of this draft?
5. So we'd have Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then I think J.J. McCarthy's probably going to make it in there. The league just seems to be really, really high on him and his potential, his progression over the last couple of years. And then I do kind of think that one of Bo Nix and Michael Penix make it. So I think that the magic number is 5. I really do.
It's going to be something to watch, and I know they are fond of this saying down there, the draft starts in Mobile, and it certainly has started revving the engine for everybody this week, including you, Trev. So we appreciate the time, brother. Enjoy that last day of practice today. I know we'll all be watching that. We'll be checking out the game, and looking forward to the rest of your work as we head into one of the most enjoyable times of the year, baby. It's draft season.
I appreciate you guys. Anytime.
Thanks, man. Hey, Mike.
Awesome stuff. Again, you can check out Trev, the lead draft analyst over at Pro Football Focus. Sorry, go ahead, Dad.
How about this? Last year, the wide receivers, some of the wide receivers that played in this game that went on to be rookies, obviously this year in the NFL, and it's been the last few years we've seen rookie receivers start to make an impact. It hadn't been that way always. Jaden Reed, who led Green Bay as a rookie in receiving, Tank Dell, who had obviously a big year with C.J. Stroud in Houston before he got hurt. Rashee Rice, who is the go-to wide receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs, and a guy who just set about every rookie record you could receiving, Puka Nacua, was in that game as well. So you want to talk about some power in that game that went on to really produce right away in the NFL, and that's what NFL fans of their teams are looking for, is those types of players.
Yeah, and you're right. The hit rate is happening more and more often. I think you can point to a lot of great coaching that they ended up around. All those players you mentioned ended up in some really strong environments in terms of their offensive coaching. But this is something that's been talked about a lot. That's a trickle up all the way from high school. These guys in 7-on-7 culture around the sport mean they are getting reps and reps and reps over and over that outpace anything that could have happened before in the way that the sport's evolved from the high school level on up and all the way up now to the pre-draft work that's getting started in Mobile this week. We'll keep an eye on all of it as we march towards the NFL draft, which seems like it's already coming up around the corner.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Zach Rosenblatt and Diana Rossini, friend of the program, of The Athletic, wrote an article that ran Wednesday morning detailing the systematic issues inside the New York Jets organization, collecting data from what the writers said were 30 sources in and around the organization. Fellas, an all-encompassing article. Did we learn anything new, or was it mostly confirming a lot of what we already thought we knew?
Yeah, Dad, I'm curious for your read on this, because most of this I read seemed like, and listen, Diana's been nails on a lot of this stuff. She's done really good reporting on this, so not surprised that it's this in-depth, but this sounds like the Jets to me, right? An organization that outside of Aaron Rodgers really does not have their bleep together, but at the same time, if I'm asking myself coming off reading this and coming off seeing what we saw this season, does a lot of this go away if Aaron Rodgers is just healthy and on the field? My answer tends to be yes, because I think the reaction that we saw when he was in the building there, and even in this article when he came back late in the season, there were a lot of guys in and around the team that remarked the same thing. It's like, man, you saw what we were capable of with him there. So as long as they get the offensive line stuff worked out personnel-wise, I do think a lot of this is stuff that goes away, provided he's just healthy in the way you banked on to begin with.
So every team goes through some adversity of some type through every season, be it injury or whatever a situation arises. We saw, Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams go out with injuries. San Francisco lose 3 straight. We see Philadelphia start out at 10-1, has some injuries, start playing bad. You just see that happen. And the big question is, how do you adjust? San Francisco gets their players back. They look like the team they thought they were, and we'll get to see them all next week in Las Vegas. You look at Philadelphia, they did not adjust very well to this. Bottom line is the players didn't execute on the field like they did the year before, and they basically folded in the playoffs. The Jets, absolute. I mean, you talk about a wheel coming off. The wheels fell off of the Jets. 4 plays into the season. And we've seen injuries before, and we've seen injuries in training camp to big-time players. But so much was made of this, and understandably so. A walk-in Hall of Famer, leaving a team he's been on for 100 years, going to another team. It's not like it hasn't happened before, but he's the latest iteration of that. And everything that went around that, and the expectation of Jet fans, now I'm speaking right to Stugatz of basically saying, wait, could this really be happening? But they always look at the glass cracked instead of half full. Came to realization 4 plays into the season. So basically what I can say about this, Mike, is how did you adjust? What did you do? From top to bottom, what was the adjustments? And it doesn't sound like the adjustments were there. Pick any aspect you want, from the Nathaniel Hackett brought in specifically because he worked with Aaron Rodgers before, in the article talking about how he doesn't adjust, to now not having Aaron Rodgers, instead of doing what might be best for one of the other quarterbacks that is out there, didn't adjust. Now, again, this is all from the article and from, again, 30 sources that they have. So, it certainly sounds pretty in-depth about what they talk to. And stuff like this, I can tell you for a fact, it goes on in locker rooms. Turmoil does happen, and it can bleed over onto the field. And this team just fell apart.
I think Hackett's the one that comes out looking the worst in this article, right? There were according to this article, multiple coaches and players described Hackett as lacking attention to detail. They said for most of the season, he would meet with the O-line coach and running coordinator, Keith Carter, and the passing coordinator, Todd Downing, during the week, but wouldn't get together with the rest of the offensive staff until last-minute game prep here for a team that, again, and I think this is the tough part, Dad, as we spin this forward, is it's tough for Nathaniel Hackett to have a lot of credibility in the building if this is all the case, because he comes off of the historically bad tenure with the Denver Broncos in that 1-year season. And then this year without Aaron Rodgers, you've got these questions about him. We've seen he's an interesting personality type. Him and Rodgers' relationship seems to be the main reason he's here. And after a season where without Rodgers, you were dead last in third down conversions, red zone offense, and total EPA, 31st in yards, 30th in offensive points per game, 30th in pass yards. They scored 10 touchdowns in their first 12 games as an offense this season, and then had 18 in total in the 17 games overall. Anywhere else and in any other situation, you probably get fired for that. And instead, he's going to be back because while this article wanted to paint Aaron Rodgers as the actual GM and kind of talked about how he pulled the strings on so many of the guys going over there, I think it's more clear Aaron Rodgers is the offensive coordinator of this team. And so that does, I think, make it difficult if things go wrong and Nathaniel Hackett's asked to go out there and put the hammer down for that to really be effective given the background and the picture that's painted here.
Yeah, listen, in all honesty, I'm surprised they won 7 games. Give a lot of credit to the defenses, right? This was a 3rd-ranked defense in the league. I think the 2nd-ranked defense against the pass. Now, they weren't very good against the run, something they'll have to improve upon, but they were the side of the ball that everybody was talking about why this marriage was going to work. Now, our offense is going to be good with Aaron. We know we have a great defense, and they only had that throughout the year, and a lot of pressure got put on them. So, listen, there'll be a lot of pressure again next year, and I agree about Nathaniel Hackett. If we're reading what went on there, if he's not meeting with other parts as much from the offense as others, and if there wasn't a lot of adjustment going on. I know the article talks about how the relationship with Wilson and Rodgers kind of drifted apart after Rodgers got hurt, because remember, he was away from the team for a while he was rehabbing in the beginning, but that's expected. We have always said that, and we all know that, Mike, as players. When you get hurt, you're a ghost. You're not there anymore. Now, Aaron would come back, and he's such a big part of the team that even though he's not playing, he's going to be headlined a lot. Shots on the headline with the headsets on, and what kind of information is he's giving. Most players, when they're hurt and not playing, they disappear and you never hear from them again. But not with Aaron Rodgers. He's gonna stay in the headline. So, yeah, this was from top to bottom. This just wasn't handled well. They didn't seem to have a plan, and you got one kind of talk at one week, 3 weeks later, you got a different kind of talk from the head coach and Robert Saleh. It was just ugly. And you can give it a little bit of, well, we get it because you banked everything on, Aaron Rodgers and he got hurt. I mean, it's almost like the old, not completely, but the old Colt teams, right? When they had no disrespect, though whenever you say no disrespect, it's disrespect. When Curtis Painter was the backup to Peyton Manning, basically Bill Polian, the GM, was like, we're building this team around Peyton Manning. If we lose him, we're done. And we know it. And we know we're done. That was kind of what went on in Green Bay without them really admitting that they were done and saying, okay, well, we have Zach Wilson, a guy that used to be, the man here or trying to be the man here, so we'll continue on with him. And it just wobbly wheeled from week one on.
And I think you're right, especially when the drop-off is, because the gravity's different around a Hall of Fame quarterback and the allowances and what you're going to do in making the offense tailored to specifically what he wants. Aaron Rodgers is an offense in and of himself, and it was that way for Drew Brees and Sean Payton in New Orleans for years, where Drew was the offense. Drew controlled everything in that. It was the same for Tom Brady. It was the same for Peyton Manning. There's a different gravity there, but Dad, when you zoom out, the larger context of the NFL this year was full of a bunch of teams in similar situations who made it work a lot better. The Steelers who made the playoffs, despite having one inexperienced and largely ineffective quarterback playing coordinating, then undermined by injury in the back half of the season. The Cleveland Browns went through 4 quarterbacks and now are probably going to have the coach of the year and potentially a comeback player of the year nominee in Joe Flacco, who is on your team. So its comparison is the thief of joy that ends up coming up and removing the excuse for the Jets, even if the situations aren't all the way the same, because you do definitely tailor more of your stuff when you've got a guy of Aaron Rodgers' caliber under center.
You do. Now, the expectation was they could be a Super Bowl contending team to a 7-win team because it's still on the players. And I will say this, I said it from day one, and I'll say it till the day I never speak into a microphone again. You can have whoever you want on the field, or whatever game plan I should say you have, but it comes down to execution on the field by the players. Now, they were put behind the 8 ball with not having one of the greatest to ever do it in your backfield, but it still falls on players to compete. So how did you handle the strife that went on? And you're right, other teams handled it well. They go through situations as well, and you find a way to work through it. The Jets, it seemed, on the field never really were, and certainly in the locker room and on the practice field never really were.
No, exactly. So, Jets, it can't possibly be worse in 2024, can it? There's no way it can be, right? Maybe? I don't know.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The PGA Tour has officially closed a deal with Strategic Sports Group, a consortium of billionaire team owners that's going to infuse at least $3 billion into PGA Tour enterprises. Now, guys, obviously the tour has been kind of in flux, a little bit of floundering since the Saudi Public Investment Fund launched LIV, poached a lot of the tour's best players. And Rory McIlroy, our man, he was once really the poster boy for purity of the PGA Tour, speaking out a lot against LIV. He's now changing his tune a bit here for the betterment of the sport.
I've changed my tune on that because I see where golf is, and I see that having a diminished PGA Tour and having a diminished LIV Tour or anything else is bad for both parties. Be much better being together and moving forward together for the good of the game. And that's my opinion of it. So, to me, the faster that we can all get back together and start to play and start to have the strongest fields possible, I think is great for golf.
Guys, do you think someone sat Rory down and was like, "Hey, we're gonna need you to stop because this is happening"?
I don't think so. No, I think because one of the other quotes he had, I was reading a few articles about this. He said, it got to where I was just banging my head against the wall. Nothing was, he said, I wasn't going to change anything. He was on the board. He said, I left the board. I said, you know what? I need to concentrate on my game. He said, what I'm saying is having zero effect. So why am I going to keep saying it? It's going to keep happening. Players are going to keep leaving. You lost the number 3 player in John Rahm. Just a couple of days ago, you lost Tyler Hatton. Tyler Hatton is the 16th ranked player in the world. Tyler Hatton's career earnings are basically $12, $13 million. He got what I would consider chump change to what other guys got. He got a $60 million deal. But in one fell swoop, he got 5 times his career earnings to join LIV. And I think, and now when you're talking about LIV and the PGA Tour getting together, I know there's another deal with the Strategic Sports Group that went on, $3 billion with owners from different American franchises here in baseball, basketball, and football. But eventually they're going to get a deal done with LIV. The LIV Tour, though, starts tomorrow in Mexico. So that's been the one thing, Mike, when you heard Rory say that last thing about, we just want to get all the great players back together. When is that going to happen? Because we all thought back when the LIV season was over and we heard about this deal, we thought, okay, they're going to all get back together or they're going to be under one umbrella and everybody be hunky-dory and feel like they're playing against the best players in the world. But that's not happening right now. LIV still has the tour going on. The PGA got an influx of money from another group, but they're still working with LIV. So we're kind of still in the separate tour category, but a lot less people give a damn anymore, and they're like, if you're going to go take the money, go take the money. So be it.
Well, I mean, this is what the Saudi, PIF fund was hoping for at the beginning, that eventually you're worn down by the sheer volume of money and the fact that it seems inevitable that in a society that lionizes capitalism, this is what always happens. This is how sports washing works. This was the original goal, and it's worked for them. And Rory McIlroy is someone that did everything he could at every step along the way, and eventually he realized that big bank takes little bank every time. And that's not to say that this is some sort of win for anybody in LIV. It should feel dystopian because it kind of is. But it's interesting now because of this deal where in this new structure, Dad, where the PGA Tour group now that's formed, it's now a for-profit entity, and now it's allowing the players to have an equity stake in this. I saw guys like Max Homa tweeting about this the other day and the impact that could have. And Jordan Spieth, who replaced Rory McIlroy on the board that he stepped down from when he got exhausted with all this, we've already had Jordan Spieth come out and say he doesn't necessarily believe a deal with the Saudi PIF is necessary now that they've got this new strategic partnership, now that they've got this money influxed into the sport. And so that's at least one person who is in theory involved with the decision makers in this process process who's saying, yeah, we don't necessarily need this, which feels like a negotiation tactic more than anything else at this. I don't think it's actually going to prevent the inevitable because, as we've seen, nothing stops the money train, no matter how much blood it's soaked in. But in this case, this does feel like a way for the PGA to at least try and throw their weight back at the table and see if they can make this a bit more advantageous for their side by claiming that they've got backing that can at least help them out.
Right, because now what PGA players are saying basically is, okay, if you're going to live, take your money. We stayed with the PGA. What are we getting out of it? If this whole thing gets worked out and nobody's mad at the players going to live anymore who are getting tens or hundreds of millions of dollars and we were loyal and stayed, what's our perk? You know, and I know the PGA is working on some things to get some extra money to some of these players, but I think the players are going to sit there and say, wait, we were trying to fight the good fight, and now basically everybody's throwing in the towel. And I guess, too, we know what Liv's ultimate goal is. Liv's ultimate goal would be to have all the top players go to Liv and Liv be the big tour, right? I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No, I think Liv's ultimate goal is that the PGA buys them out and they don't have to do any of this anymore. I think they would always rather be silent partners but have influence rather than have to carry the load, because I don't think, Dad, there's any world where this becomes the place that people go to watch golf still.
Right.
We've seen
I agree.
It's horrific television ratings. No one knows where or how to find it. It's all of these things that I don't think make that a realistic goal. I think the goal is always what we're going to end up getting, which is they get absorbed by the PGA. They get to have their seat at the table full of all the influence that they've been looking for without any of the actual heavy lifting.
Where we disagree is I don't think they felt that in the beginning. I felt they could throw money at the top players and start their own tour and it'd be more fun. You could wear shorts, we're playing music, we're going to be the tour to watch. But now, to your point, they're going in their third year. Nobody knows where the hell they are. Nobody's watching them. And you have some really good players. And it's not going to get to that point. I think there was a realization somewhere along the way that, yeah, we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to these players. And this isn't happening the way we want it if we wanted to be the tour of choice. So I agree with you now in the fact that they would like to just work a deal and not be that group that's giving out hundreds of millions of dollars to a product that nobody is watching, and only the players, the handful of players, are getting mega rich from it.
Yeah, you and I are going to disagree on that because I just don't think that was ever the goal. I don't think, based on any of the other PIF investments that we've seen, that their goal. They've got enough money to take over pretty much anything they want to if they wanted to, and it's never been that. It's been investments in different teams that we've seen in European soccer and all that. The most we've gotten towards this is the big spending on some of the high-profile names in soccer that essentially turn them into glorified PR reps for these countries here. But the goal in none of those spots has ever been to be the dominant league, because I just think the goal is a little bit more calculated and always has been in that. But it's going to be interested now how far it gets here, because you see a lot of quotes from other PGA players that are basically saying, yeah, Rory doesn't think that these guys should be penalized and they should be allowed to come back. But there's a lot of guys on tour, and he's one. The quote I saw, I want to see if I can get who this is from here, but Rory's one of 200 guys here. Not everyone necessarily feels that way about the live guys and the potential for them to come back. So at the very least, it's not as foregone as we thought it was months ago when the initial reporting came out on this. Do I still feel that ultimately this is, again, about dollars and cents in negotiation? Yeah, probably, but I'll be interested if enough of this rises to the top to be a significant roadblock.
So I guess for the majority of fans out there who don't give a damn about a lot of this, they just want to see all the golfers, the best golfers in the same tournament. When do we think that's going to happen, right? Because that's where we want to end up now, right? The LIV Tour being done. If LIV and the PGA are going to merge from the player standpoint, and players are going to come back, out of LIV, do they get the rest of their money? I'm sure that'll be an interesting negotiation just on that side. And then the negotiation of the PGA and LIV getting back to where all the top players are just on one tour again. That's the ultimate goal, is it not?
That is, I mean, that'd be the ultimate goal for fans who don't care about any of this and just want to see their favorite golfers in one spot. But the goals now seem to be, at the very least, a little bit muddied for the players and the leagues involved after this latest influx of cash that comes from over on this side of the world and not the other side of the world. So lots to pay attention to there. At some point, we're going to have to get one of our golf buddies back on here to explain what the hell is going on and when it's supposed to happen, because right now, what we thought was a foregone conclusion once again seems like it's a bunch of people spinning plates. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. But before we get there, a reminder that we will be live in Las Vegas all next week at Radio Row in the lead up to the Super Bowl. And we will be at a different time. 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern is when you're going to hear us just for next week. It is just a one-off because of the time change, because of where we are and what we got going on, boots on the ground there. You'll get the best of GoJo and Golic in the slot 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, where you're normally used to hearing us. But again, the new shows every day will be live on DraftKings Network from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock local out in Las Vegas. So we're looking forward to that. We're also looking forward to 3 quick stories to send you off on into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us that 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday if you can. But if you miss it for whatever reason, and our great guests like Trevor Sikkemma from Pro Football Focus, their lead draft analyst who joined us from down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, you can check that out wherever you get your podcasts or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done and finish the show. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third, and start with this. We made contact yesterday as a connoisseur of strange snacks all across this nation. I finally got a hold, thanks to a great friend of mine in Alex McDaniel over at For the Win, who was able to help me get a hold of the Ding Dong Twinkie mashups yesterday. Dad, I don't know if you saw this. Jesse, I don't know if this is anything that's even... once again, we've got to ask, have you had either of the things that lead into this combination? And if so, how soon can we get one of these in your hands?
No, I've never had a Twinkie or a Ding Dong.
Come on, Jesse.
Gojo was like, yeah, I know you've never had this crap. I've never had it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How old is you're pregnant now? You're going to give birth very soon.
Yes.
You have a child now. How old is your daughter?
She's 21 months, so she's almost
21
2.
months. Okay. So when your kids are growing up, remember, you have not, for those that may have forgotten, she has never had a Pop-Tart until she took a bite of it on our show. Will you let your kids, and will they be in the house, Pop-Tarts, Twinkies, Ding-Dongs? Will those kind of things that you have never eaten be in your house for your kids to eat?
They will absolutely not be in my house, but I'm not crazy. Like, if they go to a friend's house, like, I'm not going to be like, you're not allowed to have Pop-Tarts or Oreos. Like, I'm not a lunatic. I'm not going to buy it for my kids because chemicals aren't food, and there's a lot of chemicals in there. And if my kid wants a cookie, if they want a brownie, that's fine with me. Let's go to the bakery or let's make some cookies. Let's make some brownies.
No. Not go to the bakery or go to the friend's house. What's going to be in your house for your kids to have a fun treat to snack on? If you tell me
She just said cookies and brownies.
Cookies and brownies are fine.
She said go to the bakery to get them. I want to know what's going to be in your house.
Well, they don't need to eat cookies every day.
I didn't say every day. We had cookies and all Twinkies and all that in our house when the kids grew up, and they didn't house them every day. They had them occasionally, but they were there.
GoJo.
So,
if they're in the house, I'm
so you're not even going to have this stuff in the house.
More of an impulse control thing for me.
No,
but I turned out great. Look at me.
There's plenty of snacks that you can that can be around. Listen, it's not about good food and bad food. It's about food that has chemicals in it and food that doesn't.
Well, let me just say, your kids are going to go over to their friends' houses all the time because they know they'll get good stuff over there and not at your house. So congratulations there.
You can have good stuff that isn't full of chemicals. I'll show you next time you're in town.
Whatever.
You know what? Let's put it this way. I ate the chemicals, and this time around, very enjoyable treat. What I will say is they are much more ding-dong covered Twinkies than they are Twinkie-filled ding-dongs, if that makes sense. Because of the texture of the sponge cake that goes into a Twinkie, it ends up having a lot of give before you get the bite through the chocolate layer. Very enjoyable because all parties involved are good treats that I really enjoy, but it is definitely more Twinkie covered in ding-dong chocolate than it is the other way around.
So I'll say again, like we talked about the space Oreos yesterday, whoever is in charge of putting snacks at our table on Radio Row, I would like the space Oreos, and I would like the Ding Dong Twinkies mashups as well. I think those would be two wonderful snacks. Jessie will not be there, so we won't have to worry about her, infiltrating and eating all our snacks.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
I will say this, Dad. Mom just texted our family group chat and said if I had a do-over on the snacks, I wouldn't have had that stuff in the house every day. So a little bit of buyer's remorse from Mom here and a little bit of a point in Team Jessie.
Yeah,
did she really? What are we doing? Hon, what are you doing? I mean, all our kids turned out fine. What's
endorsement. A ringing endorsement. All our kids turned out fine. I'm sure your kids
did turn out fine.
They're great. They turned out great, but we have more information now, okay? That's just all I'm saying.
You know who else turned out great, Jesse? Caitlin Clark. She turned out pretty great. I don't know what she ate as a kid in Iowa, so it probably has a fair amount of corn base, but now it's led to the point where she has moved on and added yet another historic accomplishment to her resume.
Yeah, guys, she's moved into the second all-time place for scoring in NCAA history, passing former Ohio State star Kelsey Mitchell with 3,402. She had a layup. 4:58 left in the second quarter. She hits it. She passes it. Pretty cool, guys. Pretty cool. She also overtook Mitchell as the Big Ten's all-time leading scorer, finishing with 35 points for her fifth straight 30-point game, matching the longest streak of her career. And next up for her, guys, she has 3,424 career points. Now, she's got her eyes on the NCAA's all-time scoring record, 3,527, held by Kelsey Plum.
So,
basically this 4 games for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's easy, right? I mean, she has 8 games left. She has to average 13 points a game to get the record. she's averaging 32 points a game. So she's going to get this record pretty quickly. It's a testament to how great of a player she is. And also, gang, if you want your daughters to grow up and be great at basketball, name them Kelsey. Because the top 2 scorers in NCAA history on the women's side before Caitlin Clark were Kelsey Mitchell and Kelsey Plum. So there you go. Just a little nugget right there.
Life hack.
Listen, you know what? It makes me wonder. You've already got great genes in Kylie Kelsey and Jason Kelsey coming off of them. They've got wonderful daughters, and their last name is Kelsey. So it seems like we probably need to start buying stock now in what those young athletes will eventually become on the hoops court. So little life hack for everyone involved here. Don't spend all that money on a coach or AAU. Just name your kid Kelsey and prosper. It's that easy. Or Caitlin, apparently, since she's going to leave the sport as the most decorated scorer in the history of women's college basketball and one of the best players of all time. So that's very exciting for her. Jesse, let's get to the third here with something that, we've got a lot of, I think, Swiftie fans that are around the show. Dad got caught up in Swiftie internet the other day, and Jake Gyllenhaal's a part of the lore in a really bad way, and he's added to his own personal lore in a way that sounds just as bad here on a recent movie set.
Yeah, I'm trying to synthesize this because it's a lot of information that I'm going to try and throw at you right now. So apparently there was a movie called Suddenly, and it suddenly didn't happen because Jake Gyllenhaal was crazy. So it was about a pair of lovers trapped on a cold island. It was supposed to shoot in Iceland in 2021. It was going to be directed by Thomas Biddigan. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He's French, would have been his first step into Hollywood here. It was Jake Gyllenhaal, Vanessa Kirby, and apparently things just went off the rails. Jake Gyllenhaal was going to be a producer on this movie as well as starring in it. Apparently he wanted to do a scene where he got naked and jumped in the ocean and slapped a fish. He was saying that people were going to have to sleep in their cars on set in order to get everything done. He had a quote, allegedly, "When I see the sea, I swim in the sea," which is reportedly what he said when he was explaining why he wanted to get naked and jump in the water for the film. The movie never ended up happening because of all of this, but it's just another story of an actor, Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriend, acting a little bit crazy on set, which gives a little insight into these people's minds.
Yeah, he demanded a lot of rewrites there. What you talked about, he was saying that he wanted the crew on the show to sleep in their cars to prevent the set of COVID around the set here. Dad, Hollywood's a completely different animal, but for a guy that already had a low Q rating coming off the whole Red Scarf incident and the all too well 10-minute diss track, this isn't the kind of publicity you need out there to already lower your rating even more.
No, wanted everything rewritten all the time, wanted to be an ex-soldier. But the dumbest thing, his car that drove him around, he said it could be neither white or red. That's the kind of stuff that just makes me want to look at someone and say, how ridiculous can you be? Seriously, how ridiculous can you be?
Showbiz, baby.
As ridiculous as this show, download, subscribe, rate, review it. Thanks, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.